Hello and welcome everyone joining us today for the Exploring Advances in Eye Disease and Regenerative Medicine webinar. My name is Pablo. I'm the Vice President of Therapeutics Development at the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, also known as CIRM. Before our distinguished speakers are introduced, I'd like to give you a brief background on CIRM and what CIRM does and what we as CIRM employees and advocates for CIRM do. We always start with our mission to accelerate world-class science to deliver transformative regenerative medicine treatments in an equitable manner to a diverse California and world. Just a brief background about the history of CIRM. The voters of California believed in the mission of CIRM when they passed Proposition 71 in 2004 to establish CIRM as the first ever state-funded institute to advance stem cell research and treatments for a variety of diseases and conditions. At that time, CIRM was awarded $3.5 billion. CIRM was renewed by the passage of Proposition 14 in 2020, where the funding came with an additional $5.5 billion, again, assuring that our mission is worthwhile and the work we do is of value to patients and the state as a whole. These votes of confidence have allowed CIRM to fund promising stem cell and gene therapy projects, addressing challenges that hinder progress in the field and provide Californians with, most importantly, also educational grants opportunities to prepare for careers in regenerative medicine. CIRM has been in the forefront of advancing cell and gene therapies for various forms of vision loss, including a couple of diseases that you may have heard of, retinitis pigmentosa is one, and macular degeneration is another. As you'll hear today from our advisors and patient advocates, and the fact that this funding is making a significant addition to the progress in this clinical field. Ongoing research and clinical trials continue to be key to further advancement of the field. So to date, CIRM has funded several translation and clinical grants in the field of ophthalmology, and the total amount of funds that we have spent thus far is $173 million, both on translation and clinical grants for vision loss. Thank you again for joining our webinar today. Again, I'll mention its title, Exploring Advances in Key Disease and Regenerative Medicine, to hear directly from the clinicians and patients who are advancing research and treatments for vision loss. I'd like now to introduce our MC for the webinar, Jacqueline Hanklin. She's a CIRM Senior Advisor of Community Outreach and Advocacy. She will introduce our distinguished speakers and moderate the session. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Creasy, and thank you everyone for joining us here this afternoon here in California. I'd like to have the panelists introduce themselves. I think that'll be nice for you to hear about a little bit about their bios directly. So let's start with Dr. Liao.
Oh, great. Thanks, Jacqueline. My name is David Liao. I'm a retina specialist here in Los Angeles, and we see a lot of patients with our clinic, including patients with inherited retinal diseases like retinitis pigmentosa and macular degeneration. And our clinic has been fortunate enough to participate in a couple of CIRM-funded trials, and happy to continue to support and move the field forward.
Thank you, Dr. Liao. Dr. Avalos?
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today. I am Pablo Avalos. I am the Associate Director for Translational Medicine at the Regenerative Medicine Institute at Cedars-Sinai. We're always excited and very dedicated to try to find different cell and gene therapy approaches for different diseases, and one of those is retinitis pigmentosa.
Thank you. And Veronica McDonald?
Hi, I'm Veronica McDougall. I'm the founder of My Journey with RP .org, and I'm also a former patient in CIRM-funded clinical trial with JSITE, Legend 2. And I'm very thankful to be here to share my story with you. And I'm also thankful for my support team, which includes CIRM and JSITE and CBM, as well as UCI, and my wonderful family. So thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. And Kristen McDonald?
Am I unmuted now?
Yep, we hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. And thank you to Jacqueline and to CIRM. My name is Kristen McDonald. I'm a patient advocate and also an inspirational speaker, the founder of Second Vision. My website is just under construction momentarily. I was the first patient in the JSITE trial, thanks to Dr. Liao and his team over there in Beverly Hills. And I'm delighted here to be able to share that story today.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you to all the panelists for being with us this afternoon. Kristen, you just shared that you were the first patient in a CIRM-funded clinical trial. Can you take us a little bit back in time and on that journey that you had with vision loss?
Absolutely. I started tripping and falling in my mid-20s. I came out to LA as an aspiring actress and talk show host, and then didn't want to know that anything was getting in the way of my dream. So it took me a few years, being in denial, to waltz into the eye doctor's office. And I found out I had retinitis pigmentosa, which I'd never heard of before. And I slowly, gradually lost a good chunk of my eyesight over a number of decades. And 8 years ago, I was extremely over the moon to get a phone call sitting on my couch over here to say that I would be the first patient in the clinical trial at Retina Vitreous in the JSITE trial. Excuse me. And I remember that day, Dr. Clausen and his wife, Jin Yang, I think she was driving the cells up from Irvine, and there was some sort of traffic jam and everybody was lined up at the door. We were all worried about my cells. So presently, you know, I've stayed somewhat stable since the injections. The first injection was 500,000 cells in my left eye. And I can honestly say that out of the 3 injections I had over a few years, that injection, excuse me, that injection was more powerful in some ways than the other 2 injections. The other 2 that followed were 6 million, I believe, and 2 million, if I'm correct. But the first burst of light came 2 months after the injection, and where I walked into the bathroom and I saw the makeup mirror lights very, very bright. Over the period of 8 years, I still have that light, and I'm very grateful for it because it helps me navigate around at the gym and when I'm swimming, and I can see part of a car, and it definitely brought more light, literally and figuratively, into my life. However, I've noticed that the islands that the stem cell was not able to save have faded a bit more. And Dr. Liao will tell you that I'm, excuse me, it's allergy season. Dr. Liao will tell you that I'm relentless because at one point I sat across from him and said I was going to go to China because I'd been waiting so long. So it's a painful wait, you know, when you wait decades for a treatment. And I'm thrilled to hear that Veronica and the younger people got a big boost from the stem cells.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you so much for your sharing. Dr. Avalos and Dr. Liao, can you tell us about the work of ophthalmology in the context of regenerative medicine, including a bit about the history we just heard from a patient of the field, as well as what we can hope for the future?
Sure. Yeah. Ophthalmology has really served as kind of the foreground for some of these regenerative and gene therapy types of studies. I mean, the eyes, although it's a very complex organ, there are easy ways to get the therapies into the eye, surgery, injections, and so forth. And the people see the difference, literally and figuratively, of the treatment, so we can follow that. And I think the first gene therapy that was approved, the Luxturna, which wasn't, I believe, part of CIRM, but was in ophthalmology and retina. So I think we're going to continue on as a field, hopefully being able to have more and more treatments that are available to our patients and to treat things that were not previously treatable.
Yes, and I think just to expand a little bit on that, there's a lot of different approaches, and some of those will be discussed in some of the challenges. But there's different cell types that have been tried, different delivery methods, as well as different ways of packaging the cells, whether they're single cells or patches. So there's a lot of research being done in the regenerative medicine field in cell therapy as well as gene therapy. As was mentioned, a lot of these retinal diseases are inherited. There may be a known mutation, so they are a good target for gene therapy as well. However, at the same time, there are some rare mutations that then, there's not enough investment sometimes in developing therapies for those rare mutations, because only a few patients may have them. So I think that that's also some of the benefits of CIRM, is that there are researchers that are trying to find therapies there, and CIRM is able to provide funding if the projects merit them.
Yeah, and just to dovetail off of that, I mean, of course, hopefully we can treat patients with gene therapies earlier in their disease, but there's some folks that have had diseases for a longer period, and we need to have treatments that could treat all patients regardless of their gene mutation. And that, I think, is also the promise of cell therapies like J-site or the CNS protocol that we're doing, that it may apply to people who have had advanced disease and not necessarily that were able to be treated early in their disease.
And that's why our approach has also been cell therapy, because it technically is agnostic to the gene mutation.
Thank you. Dr. Creasy, Vice President of Therapeutics for CIRM, can you tell us, and then Dr. Avalos and Dr. Liao, how has CIRM directly helped to accelerate this field?
Thank you, Jacqueline. CIRM has funded a number of grants in the area of vision loss that include corneal disease, retinal disease, etc. And we are also agnostic as to whether it is cell therapy or gene therapy. What matters is that going to add value to the patient? Are the patients going to be either the disease does not progress, or they are ultimately become able to see or have improved vision, whether it's night vision, light vision, etc. So CIRM, one of the earliest grants was the one for Dr. Clausen for the J-site program. And this is why it makes me proud and happy for the patients who volunteered to be part of that journey. And the whole area of cell therapy progressed well with CIRM's kind of funding, but also because of the drive of the patients and the investigators who have been really pushing the envelope and trying to figure out mechanism of improving vision loss, whether it's through cell therapy or gene therapy. And so, and as I think, as Dr. Avalos pointed out, we are agnostic regarding the technology, because we fund the robust science that is going to add value to the patients and for them to be able to overcome whatever vision loss they have ended up with or they're experiencing at the time. And CIRM funded between translation grants and clinical grants. I was just looking at our database last night. We have funded 21 different grants. Wow. Some are active, some are already closed, but what Dr. also Liao mentioned regarding Luxturna. Luxturna was the first gene therapy that was approved by the regulators for vision loss for one form of retinitis pigmentosa. And we are very excited for those patients because they are able to have better mobility, managing their life. And we're optimistic for the patients who are undergoing the current trials within CIRM and outside CIRM.
Fantastic. I just have a clarifying question for some people who are listening in, and any of the clinicians to take that in addition to answering that question. Just in a sentence or two for the layperson, what is translational research or clinical for someone who might not understand what that means?
Okay, I can explain from the scientist's viewpoint. You know, I'm not a clinician. So from the scientist's viewpoint, it's just, do you have a hypothesis to support a potential design of a clinical trial? So you do the translation work to demonstrate either in a test tube or if available, an animal model as to whether your hypothesis is of significance towards modifying the disease course. And once you have attained some kind of data like that warrants for you to contact the FDA and file an intent to run a clinical trial, which we call it an IND, that's in this translational domain. Once you achieve an IND and the FDA clears the IND for a clinical trial starts, that's what we call clinical. And CIRM funds translation grants that include translation work where the process starts, but also what we call Clin 1 under the clinical auspices, which mainly is preparing all what is needed to file an IND, such as toxicology studies, such as a process for preparing the cells, such as some animal studies, that whatever is needed for the FDA to clear a new investigation in patients.
Yeah, I think it's.
Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, that was a great summary. It's really this lab bench to bedside type of process where, you know, good science, good rigorous science gets translated directly into treatments that patients like Kristen receives. I remember the conversation about going off to China, so I'm glad she didn't do that. But CIRM has made, you know, treatments like this possible, and we're just still early days, but we're starting to see the results of it.
And I think that ties into the benefit of having CIRM in California is that they do fund that bench through bedside. Having from an investigator's point of view, it's been very helpful to have those funds available. It's not easy. It takes a lot of work and also a lot of funds to get these therapies not only discovered, but into patients eventually through going you know, through that process. And CIRM helps provide those funds. There's not always a lot of funding mechanisms for some of these rare diseases or less specific diseases. And also there's certain types of cell therapies that don't qualify for federal funding as well. So CIRM is able to provide funds to really help translate those therapies.
If I can just add one more sentence, CIRM funds, but also provides advice, clinical advisory panels in which investigators with experience in the field join the CIRM team to discuss whatever topics are needed in order to accelerate the various grants in moving forward. And so those clinical advisory panels have been helpful to our teams. And I hope, you know, again, that will continue. And Dr. Avalos have experienced some of that himself and his grants. The most important is that we like to build a community of know-how, people who want to work together to advance the field in whatever therapeutic area. And in vision loss, really the eye lends itself to a lot of good investigations, and it's very important that we build on the strengths of what we learn from eye diseases and how best to overcome them, whether through cell or gene therapy, to advance other areas, especially in the area of neurological diseases. And by the way, the eye is still considered a neurological part of, you know, what everyone looks at as a neuroscience.
And that's Sorry, that's an excellent point, because not only those advisory panels have experts in the science and the clinical field, but there's also patient advocates on there as well that are bringing that point of view, particularly once we get to the clinic, to make sure that some of these clinical protocols and trials are taking into account a patient's point of view, to try to make these trials not only scientifically rigorous, but also patient-centric. We need to make sure that we're taking patients' point of views, because they are the ones that are going to be participating in the trials.
Thank you, Dr. Avalos. And that actually leads us to Veronica, who's a patient and a patient advocate, and sometimes they come together, or you become a patient before you become a patient advocate. But we'd like to hear, in your own words, your journey in vision loss and your participation in a CIRM-funded trial. Please, thank you.
Of course, I'm happy to share my story. It's quite a journey for me, because when I got my diagnosis, it felt like a death sentence to me. And all my dreams of helping save lives, become a nurse, be a mother, a wife, and all those things you strive for when you want to live, just shattered. And it was horrible for me. However, I had thought that I saw the same as everybody else, but what I didn't realize is my tunnel vision was getting worse. So when I got the diagnosis, my mom had furiously looked for treatments because I had given up. Because when you receive that, you don't want to deal with any of that. So, however, we came across a meeting with the clinical coordinator at JSite, which is Jessie, super nice woman. She was able to walk me through the process, and I was able to join the clinical trial, thankfully. And because of it, my eyesight had greatly improved, and including my hearing, which is unheard of because I am hard of hearing. And I was able to complete college and be able to become a wife and a mother. So I am very thankful for that opportunity, because after 3 years of my recent injection, I can still see. And it's because of CIRM funding it, and JSite and the great scientists at that location is able to make this treatment for people with RP. I'm happier than I can ever say. But also, I'm fortunate to be able to have the charity I'm starting to be able to help travel expenses for patients get those treatments, because it was very expensive. And I don't know about you, Kristen, but I had to travel from out of state, and that adds up quickly. So, yeah.
Well, I'm fortunate. If I could see, I could walk over to Dr. Liao's office.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Veronica and Kristen. Let's dive deeper a little bit into participation in a clinical trial. In your both case, of course, a CIRM clinical trial. Tell us what it means, and Dr. Liao, please also chime in after Kristen and Veronica share. What does it actually mean to participate in a clinical trial? Kristen, why don't you start us?
Well, firstly, it's very exciting. When I found out I was going to be the pathfinder, the first person, because as many of you may know in the audience, the first trial is to test for safety and efficacy. And so it was a little frightening, but I was past that in a few moments, because my excitement just took over. I had been waiting for something for so long, as I mentioned before. And I had actually been in a clinical trial 10 years prior, where they put a genetically modified pellet into the vitreous of my eye. And I didn't feel it was successful, so I opted to have it out the next year. And it was quite a bit to go through. I had a patch on my eye, and I was in the office 35 hours one week. It was a full-time job. But in terms of the stem cell, they had a number of tests preceding my first injection, like 6 or 7 hours. And now I think they've modified that for the next patients. But it was very exciting. There's a lot of emotions that goes into being in a trial. Firstly, to Veronica's point earlier, many patients just give up going to the eye doctor. And maybe because I'm a doctor's daughter, I never did that. I never gave up hope. I tried to learn, to live with the attitude that the glass is half full. And it was 30 some years ago that Dr. Heckenlively told me at Jules Stein that gene therapy was coming. And now, that was just a dream then, really. And now it's becoming a reality. That's my next hope, is gene therapy. But for patients who are looking to be in a clinical trial, you have to be proactive. Being a patient advocate has been a gift for me, to speak to doctors and patients and network with other people. And you just have to keep going. And I'm very, very excited about the prospect of gene therapy. I read an article in the Post just recently saying that there's totally blind people who can now cross the street as a result of one of the gene therapy studies. So I am hoping to be on one of those lists soon.
Thank you. Veronica, please share about actually what it means to be in a trial. What does that look like? Feel like?
To be actually in a clinical trial was extensive testing that I was willing to do to help those with RP, because we don't have a treatment available for us. But the clinical trial required a lot of your time and effort to be included. But I was happy to do it because I know there's hope that we can have a treatment available. And I know that JSITE is working on a third trial as well, and I'm very hopeful that that gets completed so that all of us with RP, including Kristen McDonald, may be able to have our eyes taken care of so we can be able to see better for the future. Because to be honest with you, I know the treatment works because I've seen it with my own eyes.
Wow. That's pretty powerful. Thank you. And Dr. Liao, as practicing physician in this field with doing these injections, and Dr. Avalos afterwards, what is it like on your side of things? What does that feel like? What is that when the patient walks through the door?
Yeah, I mean, these are oftentimes first trials in people. I mean, they've been done in the laboratory, so we don't exactly know what's going to happen either. So, but it's very exciting. And then when you see folks back after they had their treatment and they're doing better, that's what it's all about. And I think, like these folks said, it is a sacrifice. It's a lot of testing. It's a lot of time in the clinic, but it's worthwhile. And of course, everybody's experience can be different depending on the stage of their disease and so forth. So I think just having a kind of a positive outlook and kind of sticking with it is the best thing you can do. And of course, we're not, even if you do get a clinical trial, you're in no obligation to continue it. It's a totally voluntary thing, and it's a contribution on your part, and it's just a team effort, basically.
I think, a lot of the same feelings, there's excitement, there's a lot of sense of responsibility for the patient's well-being, make sure that we're performing the trial in the best way possible. But there's some hope, right? We're trying to provide a therapy that works. As investigators, we believe that the therapy has potential for benefit. So there's a lot of excitement around the therapy while still being cautious and making sure that the patient's safety is still the number one concern.
All right. So to that point, Dr. Liao, both of you, Dr. Liao and Dr. Avalos, what are some of the steps that when a patient, the planning process, the post-procedure protocol, and the length of time it would take in your experience to participate, and the lead up time?
Sure. So kind of in general, the process is each study has its own what are called inclusion criteria that includes the vision, the field of vision as well. So you come in for a screening visit, and then you check and see make sure your eyes fit the study and the study is right for you. And then after that, you'll come in for treatment, whatever the treatment is, whether it's the injection in the clinic or the surgery to implant the stem cells, whatever it is. And then the post-op visits will be fairly frequent, like every week or every month or so. There'll be a lot of testing, as Dr. Avalos says, because we need to make sure these are first and foremost safe for everybody. And then the studies usually last a year, perhaps 2 years, and we have to make sure that there's no complications, no side effects from the surgery. And of course, we also want to document, any benefits that are there, because eventually, the sponsors of the trial, whoever's, you know, the stem cell researchers or whatever company it is, have to present these to the regulatory, the FDA, and so forth, so that these drugs can be approved and made available to the general public if they do indeed work.
Dr. Avalos, would you like to?
I mean, I think that was a very good summary. You know, I think the most important part is the beginning, you know, making sure one, bringing the patient in, but explaining the consent, obtaining informed consent, making sure the patients understand everything that the trial will entail, what the risks, the potential benefits are, making sure they feel comfortable with participating in the trial, and you know, it's not only receiving the therapy, but it's all that time that you will spend for the trial. But other than that, the process is as Dr. Liao mentioned.
Right, thank you. And now on the other side, or Kristen and Veronica, please chime in, you know, for your experience in exploring these trials and the participation. What does it you know, what does it mean, you know, and the thoughts you have regarding the patience it takes to be a patient?
Mm-hmm. Who would you like to go first?
Sure, Kristen.
Okay. Well, I've always been quoted as saying, you go blind to learn patience, because everything about being blind takes patience. You have to hyper focus. And I'm sure many in the audience who are visually impaired can relate to that, because if you multitask, you're going to, you know, bang into a kitchen cabinet or miss a step or something. So patience is a virtue. Absolutely. There's a lot of emotions. I think, you know, my volunteer work and being a patient advocate over the years, because I've done different kinds of things, has always driven me and given me a greater purpose. There's no question, to be a part of a bigger community and part of the solution. I will also say that, you know, there's a lot of emotions going into a trial. Twice I've had all my friends chiming in saying, I'm going to see again, I'm going to see again. And then after the stem cell, they said, well, did you get anything from that stem cell? But to me, the lights, they had no idea. You know, my eye is like a donut. There's pieces missing, you know, like a bagel, someone's taken bites out of it. And then there are these islands that the stem cell brightened up. To me, that was a gift. So you have to frame it. You know, there was, of course, disappointment because I'd had the condition much longer than Veronica, but there's a lot of emotions up and down, and then you learn to reframe and keep going and keep the hope going.
Thank you. Veronica?
I think Kristen is right. It's really about having the hope to move forward and to believe in what you're doing, because as a patient, you have to have the time and effort into the clinical trial, and you have to believe that it's going to happen and work. And that positive mindset really makes a difference as to the outcome of the trial, because having a negative mindset about it doesn't really make a difference. And also, you have to have hope to believe in miracles, because that's what I did. I had the risk of going blind, or whatever risk there were involved with going in any clinical trial, and I still went in with a big smile on my face, excited to be a part of it. And I went through every single appointment with a big smile on my face, because every single appointment I got to see and hear from the doctors that there's been improvement happening with the treatment that I had received the first time. And it was even better the second time I got injected. So yeah, you gotta, like Kristen said, you gotta have hope to believe in this.
Right. So you said the first time and the second time. Can you tell us the years in which, or the span of time between a first and a second treatment?
Of course. In February 21st of 2018, I got my first injection. I was completely terrified. I won't lie to you. And that had improved even less than a month. Like, once I got injected, I saw an improvement in my vision in a month. Within 3 months, a big improvement. I could see my peripheral even more. I don't believe I've ever seen my peripheral as far as I can remember. And 6 months, I got more wider view in my tunnel vision, my peripheral, and it was like I had a brand new eye, it felt like. And then my second injection, which was February 22nd of 2021, after COVID era, I had noticed an even better improvement, because while this injection doesn't, as far as my understanding is, there's no timeline of when it gets worse or better. I know from my experience is that when I got the second injection, my vision got even better. So, and I was hoping that my right eye would be injected, but here's to hoping that that gets approved and I can finally get injected in my right eye. But yes, that's when I had it done.
Thank you. Dr. Avalos, I don't know, you're shaking your head if you wanted to respond to something Veronica was saying, or?
No, I was just listening.
Yeah,
Everyone.
no,
I think that that's an experience that a lot of patients have with different trials, and I think that it's sometimes hard for patients because they may hear other stories and sometimes they respond the same way or differently. And I think that's the importance of the trial and why we enroll certain numbers of patients, because everybody responds differently, and that's how we learn. And that's also the importance of having diversity in a trial. You don't want all your patients to be the exact same characteristics. You want different ages, you want different ethnicities, races, and that will help us understand more about the therapies.
Dr. Liao?
Yeah, I second that. I mean, this is a great kind of overview of the story, and I think just everybody should just keep in mind that their experiences can be different. It is a journey that is very individual for every patient and their own disease.
Right, right. So to that point, what are some of the challenges with cell and gene therapies and vision loss in general, and protocols changing based upon findings from previous research? And how do we think about that going forward?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, just because some of these trials are so new that they haven't been done in people before, just very basic things like getting the medication of the cells into the eye, how to get them in the eye, surgery, injections, where to do the surgery, where to do the injection are all things that need to be worked out. And also, I think people learn as the trial goes on, and is there a certain patient disease where it works a little better, like younger people earlier in the disease, so forth. So these are all kind of learning points that are coming about because CIRM has funded this type of research. We're learning, in addition to all the stuff that has gone on in the laboratory, how do these therapies perform in the clinic, and that's very valuable as well.
No, I agree. I think that there's certain challenges with cell. What is the right cell source? There's different types of stem cells, if we want to view them that way. There's adult bone marrow derived. There's also embryonic. There's fetal cells. There's iPS cells, the right cell lines, and then how you deliver them. Is it single cell? Is it in the vitreous? Is it subretinal? If it's subretinal, maybe it's a patch. So getting the right combination of delivery and cell is definitely something that is a challenge, and trying to find the right, as Dr. Liao mentioned, the right cell or the right cells, because it's not just one therapy, but for the right diseases as well, because just it's not always one cell or one type of stem cell will cure every single disease, right? We know that that's not the case. So that's one of the challenges. I think another one of the challenges, making sure that these therapies and trials are being done responsibly. There's a lot of sometimes therapies that haven't been proven but are sold in certain places or clinics as a cure for X or maybe Y, or X, Y, and Z. So it's important for patients to also be informed and educated, discuss with physicians, etc., on different approaches to make sure that if they're entering a clinical trial, it is a clinical trial and not just a stem cell clinic selling them a therapy under the guise of a clinical trial.
Dr. Liao or Dr. Kristens, would you like to elaborate on what that means, like a stem cell clinic versus a FDA-approved trial. So
Right. I think the rule of thumb is that if somebody feels like they're selling it to you, or that you're paying exorbitant amount of money for this, that's not typically like a well-run trial. That's maybe somebody selling something, and that's not really well regulated. So I think it's to everybody's advantage to participate in these well-run, good scientific basis, good safety monitoring trials. I would stay away from the folks that are selling things, and because I mean, if it really worked that well, it would be all over the news. You wouldn't have to really look for it. It's I think just having a healthy skepticism is always good in these types of things.
Again, what's important for CIRM, and this is why we actually define it up front, is for folks to recognize that if CIRM is involved, then we follow the Food and Drug Administration regulations, which is do no harm. You got to make sure whatever you do, you have per an approved clinical protocol by the regulators, so that safety is our highest priority. And we try to, when we advise patients, whether it's through these clinical advisory panels, whatever, and the write-ups we make, whether through the communications team, et cetera, is for people to replicate what Dr. Liao mentioned, which is watch out for what we call tourists type clinics, where they just care about the funds more so than the patients. And for sure everyone should do their homework and recognize, do they have really an approved protocol from the FDA that allows the clinician, the institution, to run a clinical trial. And if it is funded by CIRM, this is part of our stipulation. We have to make sure that there is an approved clinical trial with a clearance from the regulators, with a clinical trial design that our grants working group that reviews all of the grants is convinced is going to be safe as the highest priority.
And you can find a list of at least CIRM-funded clinical trials, not just for eye disease, but other diseases as well, on the CIRM website.
Correct.
Right, and DT is going to put in some links at the regarding CIRM's website and staying in touch. We'll talk about it towards the end. But Dr. Kristens, you talked about like regulation and FDA and approval and external grant reviews. Because we want to know, overall what a process like this looks like. As a rough estimate, like, is this 2 years, 3 years? I mean, how long roughly does a process like this take? We know it's lengthy.
Oh, it's not 2 or 3 years. Thank you for asking that. So maybe ask Dr. Avalos, but I'd let him vouch because he's been a participant with applying to grants to CIRM, for grants with CIRM. So CIRM has, again, let me just address like a clinical trial type grant, is the investigator, a California investigator or a PI from outside California needs to have a partner PI within the state of California where there is a clinical protocol that has been pulled together and that it's been submitted to the FDA. So then they fill out a Clin 2 application, which is the clinical trial application. And that's a pretty extensive process to fill out the application, but we actually, the therapeutics development team and I assist in the preparation of the grants whenever there are any questions, there are any clarifications we need to make. We can even proofread and give comments on any grants that are in the works that have not been submitted as drafts, that have not been submitted to CIRM. From the time that the grant is submitted to CIRM, and CIRM it has renewed its acceptance of clinical grants as of this July 2024. And the deadline is for clinical grants thus far is the last day of the month by 2 p.m. every month of the year except October. And for that reason, when the grant is submitted, from the time it arrives to the time with the new process, it takes 4 months to qualify whether the grant is one of the grants that needs to be prioritized. Then we go through eligibility. Then the grants working group reviews it a month later. Then the board has to approve it. So that process, it takes about 4 months. Once a grant is approved, the grantee will have to essentially initiate all the work within 45 days of accepting the grant. And so in a nutshell, it really takes a few months, but with a lot of coordination between a number of teams within CIRM as well as with the investigators who are interested. And honestly, just listening to the patient advocates today and the physicians makes me very proud of the fact that it's not just about funds. It's about the fact that there is a value and an impact by which CIRM is doing, which is allowing for patients to feel that they're supported. There is if there are better opportunities, CIRM will constantly look for them for making sure patients' eyesight is returned or the progression of the disease is stopped. And I'm a patient advocate myself, and I was involved in it's a treatment modality. I know it's taxing, but the end result, it was very worthwhile for myself. But it was not with cell and gene therapy yet.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that a little bit about that process and on the personal. I too am a patient advocate, and I think we find ourselves in this position and the dynamic of building CIRM because of patient advocacy and the importance of that work. Topic for a webinar at a later date, but at the expense of time here, and Dr. Kristens, thank you. It leads right into our not a last question, but a statement for all of you to share briefly, and then we see there's a couple of questions in the Q&A, and we'll try to address them as many as possible. But start with Kristen, and then we'll go through all the panelists. What gives you hope?
What gives me hope? I just returned. I mean, I've never given up hope. There have been some discouraging moments because, like we touched on before, there are expectations. So I set my expectations as positive as I could, and it didn't give me the ability to see faces, the stem cell, or read letters. However, it gave me that light. You know, it definitely brought light into my life, like I was saying, and stabilized that haunting feeling. Got rid of that haunting feeling of, oh my God, what am I going to do if I'm in the total darkness? So I don't have that anymore. And I'm so involved now in all these different patient advocacy groups and speaking. I just got back from the Visions Conference 2024 in Chicago, and they were talking so much about the gene therapy that I've been hearing about for 35 years. So that's my next hope. I really have a lot of faith in it for my condition, that they'll be able to help, you know, with either marrying stem cell with it or the improvement even in totally blind people or as blind as I am. So it gives me great hope.
Thank you. Dr. Avalos?
I mean, I have hope for the therapies that we're developing. You know, we do have a trial ongoing for retinitis pigmentosa using our neural progenitor cells, and you know, I'm hopeful that there'll be some good results, and we'll push that forward. And eventually, the hope is that we'll be able to provide some actual benefit to patients. You know, if we can slow down the loss of vision for them, ideally recover some, that would be amazing. But even if we can slow down progression and halt, that could be an amazing effect. So that's what we're hopeful, and that's what we're working. But you know, as always, we let the science lead the way, and we wait for the data, see what that says, and then move forward accordingly.
Thank you. Dr. Liao?
Yeah, I think that even when I was in medical school, none of these treatments were being thought of or even around. And I'm sure within the next several years, there'll be something else that we haven't even thought of now. So the hope is that we're starting to break the surface. And then one of these days, there's going to be one treatment or a number of treatments in combination that really can help people.
Fantastic. And I just want to say that everyone here, CIRM, patients, patient advocates, of course, clinicians, give me hope. So inspiring. Thank you. Well, we now have a couple of questions here, so we'll try to address them as we can. Let's see. Just trying to get through these. Veronica, what is your vision now, and when was your last injection?
My last injection was February 22nd of 2021, and my vision is doing great even after a little over 3 years, and I'm hopeful that the third trial will be completed so that I can be able to continue to see my kids grow up because they do need me.
Right. And Kristen or Veronica, or someone would just like to know what was the mechanism for J-site's treatment?
It was an injection. Sorry, is that for me?
Yeah, for you or Dr. Liao. Sure, both of you.
Sure. Well, injection into the vitreous of my eyes. I was happy for once I couldn't see the needle going into my eye.
Yes, yeah, that's right. That's the benefit. And then also, as far as the cells go, they sit in the vitreous, and the thought is that they're producing factors that improve the function of existing retinal tissue that are inside the eye.
And it was painless, so I felt no pain, and I was thankful to Dr. Mehta for giving my life back because of him. He made it painless and smooth process, even though I was extremely terrified. And also Dr. Yang and Dr. Klassen for making this available. And no one wants to have a needle in their eye, but I do because I do want to see. So yes.
And it was way better than some long surgeries, so it's compared to many, it's a simple procedure.
Thank you. Another question, I think, for our clinicians, the questions stated, why is the focus always on genetic or inherited retinal diseases? I'm reading the question, so.
Right, yeah. So I think that the reason for that is that it's a single problem that's easily isolated, and so that's an easy fix per se. For example, if you think about maybe cancer or something like that, that maybe a lot of things are causing it, or something another disease of that nature. It's very difficult to focus on one thing to find like that silver bullet that will fix that disease. So that's the reason why they focus on these single genetic diseases. But it's like the J-site, like our trial with the subretinal injections. Those are more wide treatments, those stem cell basis or cell-based therapies that maybe will treat a number of patients with regardless of their mutation. So there's different approaches, and it may be a combination of things in the future that turn out to be more useful.
Dr. Avalos, would you like to?
No, I mean, I think that, Dr. Liao, I think, answered it well enough.
Wonderful, thank you. I think we might have time for this last question, maybe one other. How do you select patients at the right time for intervention will have a positive outcome? So gene therapy study has shown the status of remaining working photoreceptors is critical factor to determine the outcome of after gene therapy. Maybe Dr. Avalos, would you want to address that?
I mean, I think it will depend on the therapy, but I think in general, the sooner you treat any disease, the better, particularly with neurodegenerative. The way to view this is that you're losing certain type of cells that are important for the function. And in this case we're talking about the retina, but it could be neurons when we talk about, for example, ALS. So when you're trying to target it, the more neurons that there are, or the healthier the retina is, if you treat at that point, there's going to be more potential for effect. But really, each therapy is going to be different, and the investigators use the knowledge there is in the field that has been done by other therapies as well, and what they know of the therapy that they're studying at the moment. So that's really how we go about it.
Okay. Okay, I think we'll let this last question. I've been told to give up going to the eye doctor unless I have a true emergency, such as pain in my eye, and not to bother them, and that the diabetes issue is all my fault. Giving up on going to the doctor, anyone?
Yeah, I would say no, please go to the doctor. I mean, it might be sure that there's nothing that they can do at this point. But I think the patient advocates here will say, will let you know that keeping in touch and keeping at least in the loop of things, of therapies that may in the future, there may be a long wait, but keeping in touch and just making sure there are no other problems is definitely the way to go. And it may be discouraging, but being patient and just trying to do the best that you can with the present technology is all you can do at this point.
Kristen or Veronica, in a couple of seconds, do you want to address?
I used to have a support team every year because my closest friends or family members would know that I went to the eye doctor that year, and they would always know that I'd come home, in a lot of emotion. So I had a support team, and I think that's very important to build on.
And also, thankfully, my doctors were super supportive, and they were making sure that I felt comfortable. And I don't know about your experience, and I'm really sorry to hear that they treated you that way. But if it wasn't for my doctors making me feel comfortable, it's really building that client-patient or doctor-patient relationship that means a lot too. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And sadly, we're just about out of time. I want to extend an immense gratitude to the panelists, Dr. Creasy, Vice President of Therapeutics for Surum, your participation and your contributions to the field of regenerative medicine, Dr. Liao, Dr. Avalos, and our incredible patient advocates going through this and paving the way and sharing your intense and personal stories so that we can all know what it feels a little bit like to be a patient and to be a patient advocate. Again, incredible gratitude to CIRM and to all of you. If you please, we encourage you to stay involved with CIRM and to be in the know. We'll put in the chat a sign up for the stem cellular blog, and join public meetings. They're listed on the website, CIRM's website. And those that are public, you can learn about conversations that are happening that are accessible to the public. And we wish you a great afternoon, great evening, wherever you might be, and stay tuned for further webinars. Thank you. Thank you.